Well, welcome back to another Chris McPherson Show Daily Dose. A little bit of challenging recording schedule this week means no weekly Around the Grounds episodes, but we'll have some extra daily doses dropping at the back end of the week, including this one where we're going to talk about the AFL Grand Final. And if we're talking AFL, who else would we welcome in? But recent premiership winner, not in the AFL, but in the local competition down in his neck of the woods, and a drought-breaking premiership it was. But Brodie Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. Broads, good to have you back. You've recovered. You've lost some hair, but you've got a premiership.
Exactly right, mate. Got my voice back this week as well, which is nice. And look, mate, there's nothing like a rebirth of a community with something like that. We're a small community town of less than 100 people, but I tell you what, mate, there was 400 people jam-packed into the club on Saturday night. First flag in 28 years, and 14 of them grew up playing under 13s for the club. So it's a homegrown premiership, and it's great. It's still a great feeling, mate. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know we're talking off air, and I think the team that you beat, the rivals, they'd won 6 in a row up to this point. So a big momentum shift in the competition too, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think they'd won something of 11 of the last 12 flags and the last 6 straight. And look, and I think one of the ones they lost, they were actually undefeated until the grand final, and just hence their dominance. And the worst thing is they're actually a neighbouring town, and they're one of those clubs that they're actually... You wouldn't know they'd won 6 straight flags. They're all good blokes, unfortunately, and which makes it even harder. If they were idiots about it, it would make it so much more sweeter. But look, it was a great win, and I think there was something like nine young fellas who played in the grand final. Their dads actually played in the last flag 28 years ago. So look, mate, there's storylines wherever you go, and it's nice to have a few days off the piss anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd be looking forward to drying out, sobering up, and all of the above. And what a way to do it as we head into AFL Grand Final. Let's talk about the AFL Grand Final. It is Geelong up against Brisbane. Geelong and Brisbane played in week 1 of the finals. We know that. Geelong then had the win, got the week off, and they came up against Hawthorn last week. So let's focus on that part first. What did you take away from the Cats and Hawks game?
I took away Hawthorn had a pretty fast start, and Tom Stewart going down. It was panic stations everywhere for Geelong. And then the camera panned up to Chris Scott, and he looked like he was just going for a nice, calm, chill Friday night. You wouldn't have known for 1 second that he was under pressure. And I think he knew up his sleeve he had a break glass in case of emergency 35-year-old sitting in the forward lines called Patrick Dangerfield. He could just throw in there and tear the game to pieces. I mean, you talk about finals performances. For me, that ranks up there as the best I've seen, I think, nearly since Dustin Martin's first grand final performance as well. And obviously the 2 Norm Smiths that followed. And to have 35 possessions, 3 goals, and just be a beast in that midfield, it was just a Geelong side that we knew at some stage this year that Patrick Dangerfield was going to move out of the forward lines and get pushed into that midfield. And when it happened, I think even though we all knew something was going to happen and he was going to put his foot down, none of us expected him to have this impact.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one, isn't it? Like, a lot of people were starting to, it always seems to be the running theme with Geelong. They start talking about age, and they like to prove otherwise. It's not quite a retirement village down there, but he looked absolutely back to his mid-20s when he's running through that midfield, those quads of doom, as I was calling them. He is, like, you forget how physical and strong he really is. And again, it goes to talking about how the game is now that, it's no longer these small-bodied, mobile midfielders. They're still massive units.
Exactly right. But the best thing about him is he can go through and just burst open a pack. And whether he takes a ball or whether he doesn't, when you've got the outside run of Max Holmes and Bailey Smith, it's the perfect combination of chaos and a ball like Patrick Dangerfield, but then also the class and the hard running of a Bailey Smith. And you have Brian Myers who can come through there, and he gets 5 kicks. He's hitting up the forwards, 4 times out of that. And they're just the perfect midfield group. Tom Atkins can immediately go to someone like a John Newcomb, who has dominated every final he's played in. And then Tom Atkins, who, let's not forget, 3 or 4 years ago was missing out on these grand final spots. And now he's arguably one of Geelong's most important players, because he just is a bit like Josh Dunkley for Brisbane. He sits on the opposition's best midfielder and just goes toe-to-toe. He doesn't necessarily tag, but he just places a hard run with Rowe and beats him one-on-one at the footy.
Yeah, he certainly does, and it's going to be a key piece for Geelong, and it'll be interesting to see how they shape up. Obviously, as you talked about. There's going to be that key out after the injury in this game, though.
Yeah, there is. Tom Stewart, and it's one of those ones now you look back and obviously there was so much talk with the momentum going into finals, how everyone was ready for finals and we had that week off. Do we want to move that after prelim final weekend, or does then that, take a bit of the momentum from the prelim to the grand final? So you're never going to please anyone. And look, Tom Stewart, he is a big loss, but at the same time, I think we've also seen with Geelong, no matter what they get thrown, they have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D in every inch of that field, whether it's the midfield group, whether it's the forward group, or whether it's the back line. I mean, you have Mark Blitzarves who can just fill any single hole on that field. So I think Reece Stanley would come in, and then you could see Blitzarves go across half back and take a dangerous forward, whether that's a Logan Morris or someone of that ilk this weekend.
Yeah, certainly it'll be interesting to see. I think I'm with you that a Reece Stanley, Jed Buse could be another angle for them, depending on what they want to look to do. On the other side of it, as we said, Brisbane, they've gone the hard way. These two sides, as we said, played in the first week of finals. Geelong got the chocolates there. Brisbane then went up and defeated Gold Coast in the Q Clash before a strong win against the Pies on the weekend. And look, they're shaping well. It's their third grand final in a row. There's some people that are saying already that Chris Fagan and Fagan and Scott, I'll get that right, are going head-to-head here for a title in terms of not just grand final, but potentially etching their name as one of the best coaches in the modern era.
I still think it's hard to go past Chris Scott. I mean, he hasn't had that one bad year ever since he really started. I mean, even the year that they didn't make finals, he rested hard. As soon as they realised they weren't making finals, he put everyone in for surgery, and the next year they win the grand final by 70 points. So for me, that's still Chris Scott. Fagan wins this. He's up there with Chris Scott. But look, it's just this Brisbane side, and the reinvention this year has been phenomenal for me. I mean, Kitty Coleman this time last year does his knee, and all of a sudden their best ball user off half-back, we'll just put our oldest bloke, back to a half-back flank. And Dane Zorko has had the best 2 years of his career, but it's their young group that's really come in and keeping so many older heads out of this side. I mean, Logan Morris, Will Ashcroft, Jasper Fletcher, Darcy Wilmot, Kyle Lohman and Levi Ashcroft, all players under 22, but would all probably be in your starting 18 when the ball gets bounced down this weekend. And I mean, Ty Gallup, how could you not talk about it's his 5th game ever playing at the MCG in front of 75,000 screaming Collingwood fans, and he stands up and plays the game of his life under so much pressure. And they just have this faith in every player they bring in, no matter whether or not they've had Maccas about 3 hours ago and they're using someone else's shoes like Logan Morris last year. Everyone who comes into this Brisbane side, they just back to the hilt. And we're seeing that now, that the growth of their players at such a young age is ahead of so many others in the competition.
I think that's where Fagan's case is. Obviously, as a development coach, when you have a look, versus a Chris Scott. 11 of the last 15 years, he's taken Geelong to a prelim. Chris Fagan now 3 grand finals in a row. It could be very interesting to see who wins it. You mentioned Josh Dunkley before. You want to talk about success? Here is a man who's in his 10th season playing in his 5th grand final. That is absolutely phenomenal. Taken 25 in the national draft.
And it is, but at the same time, I think he's Brisbane's most important player, and I also think he was Western Bulldogs' most important player. And he's probably similar into the ilk of Tom Atkins, but probably just, that little bit higher rated player, because I don't think he's had a game this final series where he's got under 10 tackles. I think he's averaging something like 12 or 13 tackles per game. We saw his influence on Jordan Ngoe last weekend, and the week before that, his effect in that Gold Coast midfield. And he goes in there and he's not that midfielder who's, going to dominate you out of stoppage. But what he does is this weekend, I expect him to go straight to Patrick Dangerfield every time he goes, in the midfield, and we'll sit on his back shoulder. And every time Danger gets it, he's just going to stop his run at the ball if he has to bump him. But I love what Josh Dunkley does. And they talked about at the Brownlow Medal, I think it was Harris Andrews, and they talked about all their incoming recruits like Joe Danaher and Lockie Neal. And he said, I actually think the best one we've brought in has been Josh Dunkley, because it allows every other player in that in the midfield for Brisbane to just play their game, knowing Josh Dunkley will have their backs if the ball gets turned over, because he'll be on his bike running defensively harder than anyone.
It's an interesting one too, I guess, when you have a look at him. This is a guy who could have quite easily, at the end of 2021, if my memory serves, when the Western Bulldogs lost that grand final, he wanted to trade to Essendon. What a sliding doors moment that would have been.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, he also could have been a father-son for the Sydney Swans before he even got drafted and elected to stay in Melbourne. So, yeah, look, he would be the perfect person for that Essendon midfield right now. And who knows, Zach Merritt might not be asking for a trade if he had his good mate Josh Dunkley going there with him. But, look, I think this one here on the weekend, Josh Dunkley's role cannot be understated. Look, there's so much talk about Dane Zorko and the role that he played, and Darcy Wilmot, the MCG suits him so much with the way he plays his footy. As soon as he gets that drive through the middle of the ground. I mean, Jasper Fletcher, this new age of Brisbane Lions players coming in. Charlie Cameron's just starting to creep up his form. I mean, he had a shocking last half of the year, shocking nearly first half of the year, shocking season really for him. But Kyle Lumen starting to get his hands on the footy, and I think going the hard way about it. Playing that extra game is going to hold him in a lot better stead, knowing that they've played Geelong before going into this grand final. And I think it's going to be a close one.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you can find an argument for either side. Obviously the Cats, that attack, both teams sit in the top 4 for attack, top 6 for defence. They can go toe-to-toe with each other, which is where the matchups fell down for their opponents last week, I feel. But the Cats, I think they scored 100 points in their last 8 games. Jeremy Cameron, 6 shots a goal in the first quarter last week, which is a record. It's going to be interesting to see how that continues to shape for them. When they led last year, they were 17-0 from there. They've done the same very similarly this year. When they get out to an early start, the Cats, they are strong. The Lions, it's about contested possession, though. If they can get their head over the ball, and as you said, nullify the likes of a Dangerfield, if they win the contested possession count, they are 12-0 when they've done that this year. So it's going to be interesting. They clearly lost that battle against Geelong in the first week of the semi-finals in the qualifying final. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's exciting. I think, Dangerfield's a key person. I think McCluggage and Dunkley are probably the 2 keys for Brisbane. Geelong are going to be pretty warm favourites, I think, and it's going to be probably easier to find a narrative that says Geelong win it. I think they probably do, but to your point, I think this is decided. I don't think this is one of these grand finals that's blown out at half-time or three-quarter time. This is going to be, hopefully, for the neutrals, one for all ages, and this could come down to kicks just before the siren.
Yeah, I think if Brisbane are to win, they need one of those captain's games like we've seen just about 3 times they've played from Harris Andrews, who's been phenomenal, not just shutting down his opponent, but knowing when to leave, intercept, and then set up that attack. Because when they get the ball off half-back, they are pretty well the most dangerous side in rebounding. I mean, we've seen what Dane Zorko, but then Darcy Wilmot, they get the ball out to those wings. And when the chaos drives inside 50 and you can get a Kyle Lohman, Charlie Cameron one-on-one, we know what they can do. I mean, look at Kyle Lohman's first half last year. It was nearly going to look like it's going to do Bobby Hill and 2 small forwards, going back-to-back in the Norm Smith medal. But just want to touch on one thing, and that's the recruiting of Geelong before we get into anything further. And, everything talks about, Geelong and, they've got a farm, their salary cap, must be doing this. But you go through their draft hand, and the players that are likely to be playing this weekend, 9 of them could have been picked up by other clubs. Like, these are players either pick 86, like a Jed Buse, Lawson Humphreys, mature age recruit from the Waffle. No one wanted him. Tyson Stengel, no one wanted him after his off-field issues. Mark O'Connor and Oisin Mullen, just a couple of lads over from Ireland. Blitz Arves, Australian steeplechaser. Jack Bowes. Geelong received pick 7 and Jack Bowes for a 3rd-round pick just because they had salary cap issues. Tom Stewart, not playing this weekend. Tommy Atkins, another VFL player. Sean Manor, 2 years ago, kicked 6 goals and got 25 in a VFL Grand Final. But the one that sticks out to me is the smartest recruiting, smartest pickup that they've done. So they got Tim Kelly for pick 24. They drafted him pick 24 in the national draft. 3 years later, they traded him to West Coast, essentially for 2 first-round picks, which they flicked on to GWS for Jeremy Cameron. So you look at that, and Geelong's recruiting, everyone's talked about the farms and all this, and they joke around about the salary cap. But when you go down to the pure numbers, they've got the best scouts and the best drafting by a considerable margin, which is why they don't bottom out.
Yeah, I think I love the story of Manor. No AFL club contacted him, full stop, until he was 25. He spent some time up in the NTFL. He's played in some big games up there. He played with the Gold Coast Suns as well in a grand final in 2023 in the second tier. And that's where he really started to, be seen, I guess, at that point. I think in that grand final, he won the Norm Goss Memorial Medal, lost the grand final, kicked 6 goals from 28 disposals in a losing grand final. So certainly knows how to step up into a big game. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's actually, and I know we don't talk a lot of punting, I actually think he's a good roughie if you're having a look for best on Saturday. So looking forward to that. The last question before we get your prediction, Brody, Lachie Neale, obviously the other big talking point. Does he come back from that calf injury? It was a 4 to 6 week injury. It's only 3.5 weeks to this point. It'll be just short of 4 weeks when it comes to game day. My view is Lachie Neale at 70 to 80%. As much as it's a risk, you've got a sub there, but no disrespect to any of those players. With the injuries that the Lions have already got, he's got to be at 70 to 80% better in terms of his impact and what the influence he'll have on that team than what the next person is available in that squad.
Yes and no. I agree to an extent, but calves are completely different things. And Chris Scott will send probably his most explosive midfielder to Lachie Neale and say, let's test out this calf. Whether that's a Max Holmes who lines up on him and just sprints away and said, you really want to test out this calf, Lachie, or let's go for a run. So Chris Scott will be smart enough to do that. And then I think we'll find out halfway through the first quarter whether or not he's 100%, because yes and no. Lachie Neale was going to be so dangerous around stoppages, but if his calf isn't ready to keep up defensively, Chris Scott will pick that up immediately, and he will know Brian Myers, Bailey Smith, Max Holmes. They will send all the runners at a stoppage to Lachie Neale and then get him on the other way. So it's one of those. It's a risky thing. You really want Lachie Neale, and also the attention that he will immediately get around the stoppage. So it will help you out, but at the same time, if he's anything short than I reckon 80%, he's going to get found out very quickly in a grand final.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the same. I think it's got to be around that sort of 80% or above for it to make it a worthwhile risk. I don't love, I can see the theory behind, but these people that are suggesting him as the sub, because I just feel as soon as Brisbane get in trouble, there's going to be too much of an impetus to throw him in. And if he's not good enough to start, which, as we said, Lachie Neale at 80% should be good enough to start, then I don't think you want to be throwing him in and using him as the sub in the third, early in the third quarter, say, when you need an injection, all of a sudden the calf goes in the second run and it's all over from there. It is a risk. We've seen lots of players do it. We've seen a lot of players, with non-soft tissue injuries play in grand finals, and the majority of them have come off well. We won't talk too much about Phil Davis, but he still says that the injury wasn't the problem. He just had one of those days, as did most of his team. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, he'll be given absolutely till the last minute to try, till 60 minutes before. Everyone will have the binoculars on and when they have to name their final teams. Because, if you're Fagan, you've got to give a player of Lachie Neale's ilk absolutely every chance. Because as you said, Brody, if he can get himself to 80% on game day, well, that's then a risk worth taking, because Lachie Neale at 80% could actually, turn a tide. And, he might not win you a grand final on his own back at 80%, but he can be enough to turn a tide when you got your backs against the wall.
I'll tell you what it does. Lachie Neale plays and expect a huge game from Hugh McCluggage, because he's not then getting the best defender from Geelong as well. So just having him in that team frees him up a lot. But before we move on further, I just want to touch on the grand final sprint. I'm not sure if you've seen the lineup for this. So Harry Garside's been put into this, and Gout's doing the firing gun. But it's a shortened field. So it's going to go through the names: Toby Green, Jack Higgins, Harry Garside, Murphy Reid from the Dockers, Morris Rioli, Richmond, Nick Blakey, Bo McCreary, all pretty fast ones. But who do you think's the second favourite? You can actually bet on this, believe it or not. The second favourite, they've got Jed Walter, the 110 kilo Gold Coast Sun. So I'm not sure if there's something dodgy's going on here, but Morris Rioli, who is lightning quick, Jack Higgins, who if he's running to an open goal square, will break there's all kinds of speed records. They've got Jack Higgins at $21 and Jed Walter, second favourite, at $6. What's going on in?
Yeah, there's something questionable going on there. But let's be honest, AFL Grand Final sprints and betting controversy are not unknown bedfellows, are they? When you think about it, what was it 3 years ago? There was some betting inquiries after. Was it Josh Rotham cut across lanes?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. So yes. Anyway.
Just thought that was an interesting little note just to have a look at. So if Jed Walter gets a 50-meter handicap, grand final day, that's what.
Yeah, that's I was going to say, are we still gifting this? Is it and Harry Garside? That's an interesting inclusion.
Yeah, of all people. So they've only got 8 teams and just popped in Harry Garside.
I reckon Gout could fire the gun and do a couple of star jumps and then beat them all. That'd be a great showing.
Should start him from 200 meters, from 200, and everyone else at 125, and watch him come home. I reckon.
Yeah, like Kathy Freeman when she won the 400 at the Stall gift with about 100-meter head start. Or in the NFL, I don't know which college it is. They've got the beat the fridge, and the guy he's a big stocky bloke, and he lets them get a bit of a lead, and then just powers them down because he's an absolute gun. But anyway, keep an eye on it. There might be an investigation required. Bros, to wrap it up, let's get in there. Let's have our predictions. Who do you have winning this? Who's going to be best on? Any other tips for the day?
Look, I've got the Cats to win. I think best on ground. It's a favourite for me. I reckon it'll be Bailey Smith. I just don't think anyone from Brisbane has a running power to go with him. But if for a nice sort of roughie at odds for the Norm Smith, if Brisbane win, I think it'll have to be a huge game from Darcy Wilmot, who's close to $50 odds right now. So he'd be my roughie to jump on. So without him, tearing game apart, I don't know if Brisbane can win.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to go Geelong to win by 4. It's going to come down to a kick. And as I said, I like him for a bit of rough value. I'm going to go Sean Manor. It'd be a great story if he could get it. So, and look, as I said, he knows big games at the lower levels. It's time to take that step. He's, a mature age. I think he's just turned 28 last month. So certainly won't be overawed by the occasion. But it's going to be a great afternoon. I think, obviously a bit of Snoop Dogg to get Snoop D-O-double-G to get things rolling. Although I hear he's going to be at Moonee Valley on Friday night. That could, I'm not sure how the Moonee Valley punters, how many of them will actually know him. But anyway.
I was going to ask, who do you reckon got higher last weekend, Snoop Dogg or Jamie Elliott with that mark? But it's going to be an interesting little mashup before the game, Snoop Dogg into Mike Brady or Mike Brady into Snoop Dogg. It's a collab I don't think that we knew that we needed.
No, I don't think we did. I don't know, maybe just get Snoop Dogg rapping up there, Kazali. What do you think?
I reckon that would be ideal. And I reckon, apparently I was talking to Spider, and Mike Brady did 6 shows in one day, and I think he's getting close to 50 for the fortnight, 50 sporty lunches. So I think he only works 1 month a year, Mike Brady, and in September, and that's all he has to.
Well, mate, when you're on a good thing, stay on it. You might need to build a succession plan, Brady, but I don't think you might be more equipped for that than I am, I think, musically. So we'll wait and see. But as always, mate, a big thank you to you. Looking forward to the grand final on Saturday. It's going to be a huge one. In the meantime, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and hit that bell as well so you get some notifications. And if you want to stay up to date with us in between our episodes, you can find us on all your favourite social media platforms at The Chris Mack Show. And again, if you wanted to see some more AFL and probably a little bit of cricket over the summer, I'd say the Third Man Up podcast is a great place to find it, where you can find Brody and the previously mentioned famous, infamous, second most fined man in AFL history, Spider Everett. Brode, thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. We'll get him back to number 1 next year in the Legends game.